My wife's baby brother hid cameras in my daughter's nursery, so I did much more than just expose him. 2 years later, he's asking for help because people like him can't handle prison. My wife Anna and I had this perfect little life going. We owned our house in the suburbs, had a 1-year-old daughter, and everything felt stable for the first time in my life. Growing up in foster care taught me to value security above everything else, so having my own family and home meant the world to me. Anna came from one of those big, chaotic families where everyone was always in each other's business. Her younger brother Derek was the golden child who could do no wrong in her eyes, even though he was pushing 30 and still couldn't keep a job or apartment for more than 6 months. So when Derek called Anna crying about losing both his job and his place, I already knew what was coming. She gave me those puppy dog eyes asking if he could crash with us for just a week or two until he got back on his feet. I wanted to say no, but Anna was already planning where he'd sleep and talking about how family helps family. Derek showed up 2 days later with 3 garbage bags of clothes. The first week actually went okay. Derek helped with dishes, played with our daughter, and even fixed our squeaky bathroom door. Anna kept shooting me these "see, I told you so" looks whenever Derek did something helpful, but then little things started changing. Derek began leaving his dishes in the sink overnight. He'd monopolize the TV during my usual downtime after work. He started using our garage as his personal workshop for some mysterious project that involved power tools at weird hours. The real turning point came when I overheard him on a phone call in the kitchen. He was talking to some friend and casually referred to our house as his place while describing where to pick him up. That's when I started paying closer attention and taking mental notes of everything Derek did. He made himself a spare key without asking. He invited friends over for dinner without checking with us first. One evening I came home from work to find 4 strangers drinking beer in my kitchen, while Derek played host like he owned the place. When Derek introduced me to his guests, something in his tone made me feel like the outsider in my own home. Anna defended him again when I tried to talk to her about boundaries. She said I was being controlling and that Derek was just trying to feel comfortable. 2 months in, I finally put my foot down and told Derek he needed to find his own place by the end of the month. He smiled and nodded but never actually gave me a direct answer. A few days later, I came home to find him rearranging our living room furniture because he thought it would flow better this way. That night, Anna exploded at me for making Derek feel unwelcome. I realized Derek had been whispering in her ear about how unreasonable I was being. He was playing us against each other while slowly taking over our lives. I contacted a lawyer about eviction procedures and learned Derek had been getting mail delivered to our address, which complicated things legally. The lawyer said it could take months to get him out through official channels. Things escalated when Derek filed a police report claiming I had shoved him during an argument that never happened. I had to install security cameras throughout the house and started recording every interaction we had. Derek would smile and act friendly whenever the cameras were rolling, but his whole demeanor changed when he thought no one was watching. The breaking point came during a power outage last month. I found Derek in the garage messing with our electrical panel with a flashlight. When I asked what he was doing, he claimed he was trying to help restore power, but something about his story didn't add up. We got into the biggest fight yet. Derek finally dropped his nice guy mask and screamed that I didn't deserve the house or the life I had because I hadn't built anything myself. He said people like me who grew up in foster care would never understand real family loyalty. Anna witnessed the whole thing and finally saw Derek for who he really was. She told him he had to leave immediately, but Derek just laughed and said no one could make him go anywhere. I documented every unauthorized purchase he'd made, every boundary he'd crossed, and every lie he'd told. I found a legal loophole since Derek had never paid rent or signed any lease agreement. The sheriff-assisted removal happened on a Tuesday morning. Derek tried to film the whole thing and play victim, but I handed over a thick folder of documentation to the officers. As they escorted him out, Derek turned back to me with this cold smile and said I hadn't seen the last of him. For 3 weeks, everything felt normal again. Anna and I repaired our relationship and set stronger boundaries with her family. Our daughter started sleeping better without Derek's late-night garage projects keeping her awake. Then yesterday, a package arrived with no return address. Inside was an unmarked USB drive. When I plugged it into my laptop, my blood went cold. It was video footage from inside our bedroom taken over the past few months. Derek had been watching us the entire time. It took a turn I never expected. The first video was from 3 weeks ago, showing Anna and me getting ready for bed. My hands shook as I clicked through more files. There were dozens of them, all time-stamped, all from different angles in our bedroom. Some showed us sleeping. Others captured private moments that made my stomach turn. Derek had drilled tiny holes in our walls and installed miniature cameras while we were at work. I slammed the laptop shut and ran to our bedroom. Sure enough, when I knew where to look, I could see the tiny pinholes in the corners where the walls met the ceiling. I grabbed a stepladder and started pulling at the drywall. A small camera fell into my hand, no bigger than a button. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. Anna walked in as I was tearing apart the second corner. She saw the camera in my hand and the color drained from her face. I showed her the USB contents on my phone, scrolling through just the file names so she'd understand without having to see the actual footage. She ran to the bathroom and threw up. We spent the next 3 hours searching every room. We found cameras in the bathroom, the nursery, even inside the air vents. Derek had turned our entire home into his personal surveillance system. Each discovery made me angrier. This wasn't just about invading our privacy. This was calculated, planned over months. I called the police immediately. 2 officers arrived within the hour, and I showed them everything. They bagged the cameras as evidence and took the USB drive. One officer mentioned this was the 3rd case like this they'd seen this month. Apparently, hidden camera technology had gotten so cheap and accessible that these violations were becoming more common. The detective assigned to our case called the next morning. She'd reviewed some of the footage and confirmed it was definitely recorded in our home, but then she dropped a bombshell. Derek had already contacted them first, claiming the cameras were his property that we'd stolen when we kicked him out. He said he'd installed them for security purposes during his stay, and we had no right to remove them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The detective explained that because Derek had been living in our home, even temporarily, the legal situation was complicated. She advised us to get a lawyer immediately and file for a restraining order. In the meantime, they'd investigate both sides of the story. Anna spent the day calling every family member, warning them about Derek. Most didn't believe her at first. Derek had already been spreading his version of events, painting us as the villains who'd thrown him out on the street. Her parents were especially resistant to the truth. They kept insisting there must be some misunderstanding. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Derek. He spoke calmly, like we were discussing the weather brother. He said he had backup copies of all the videos, and if we didn't drop the police report, he'd make sure everyone we knew saw them. When I told him that was blackmail, he laughed and said good luck proving it. I recorded the entire conversation on another device. Derek was cocky enough to admit he'd been watching us for months, said he deserved compensation for the emotional distress we'd caused by evicting him. He wanted $50,000 or the videos would end up online. I kept him talking, getting him to reveal more details about when and how he'd installed the cameras. After hanging up, I immediately sent the recording to our lawyer and the detective. Both said it would help our case significantly. But Derek must have realized his mistake because an hour later, his lawyer contacted ours. Suddenly, Derek was claiming I'd edited the recording, that I was trying to frame him. The back and forth accusations were exhausting. We couldn't stay in the house knowing what had happened there. Anna took our daughter to her sister's place 2 hours away while I dealt with a legal mess. I spent my days meeting with lawyers, talking to police, and trying to figure out how someone I'd let into my home could violate us so completely. The investigation revealed Derek had purchased the cameras months before moving in with us. He'd planned this from the beginning. The detective found receipts and online orders dating back to when he first lost his apartment. It wasn't just opportunistic, it was premeditated. Our lawyer filed a civil suit alongside the criminal charges. We sought damages for invasion of privacy, emotional distress, and the cost of making our home livable again. Derek countered with his own suit, claiming we'd damaged his property and violated his rights as a tenant. The legal bills started piling up fast. 3 days after the initial discovery, I got another package. This time it contained printed screenshots from the videos with a note, "Drop everything or these go to your workplace." I recognized Derek's handwriting. He was escalating, getting desperate. I turned this evidence over to the police as well. The detective informed us they'd executed a search warrant on Derek's current location, a friend's apartment where he was staying. They found multiple hard drives containing not just our videos, but footage from at least 2 other homes where Derek had previously stayed. We weren't his first victims. This revelation changed everything. The other families came forward with similar stories. Derek would move in claiming hardship, install cameras, then use the footage for blackmail after being asked to leave. One family had paid him $20,000 to delete their videos. Another was still dealing with the trauma 2 years later. The prosecutor upgraded the charges to include multiple counts of voyeurism, extortion, and criminal harassment. Derek's lawyer tried to argue the cameras were for home security, but the placement and nature of the footage made that defense laughable. No security system needs hidden cameras in bathrooms and bedrooms. Anna struggled with guilt over bringing Derek into our lives. She'd trusted him completely, defended him against my concerns, and now felt responsible for what happened. I reminded her that Derek was a master manipulator who'd fooled multiple families. This wasn't her fault, but the trust between us had taken a hit that would take time to repair. We had to hire a specialized company to sweep our house for any remaining devices. They found 2 more cameras Derek had hidden so well even the police missed them. The cost was astronomical, but we couldn't live there without being absolutely certain every camera was gone. The psychological toll of never feeling safe in your own home is hard to describe. Derek's family finally started to see the truth when the news broke about the other victims. His parents called Anna crying, apologizing for not believing her. They revealed Derek had always been manipulative, even as a child, but they'd hoped he'd grown out of it. Instead, he'd just gotten better at it. The criminal trial was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, Derek continued his harassment campaign. He created fake social media accounts to spread lies about us. He sent packages to my workplace claiming I was the one who'd installed the cameras. Each new attempt was documented and added to the case against him, but it was exhausting to constantly be on guard. Our daughter was too young to understand what was happening, but she could sense the tension. She became clingy, crying whenever we left the room. We started family therapy to help process the trauma and protect her from the long-term effects. The therapist specialized in cases involving privacy violations and helped us understand we weren't alone in this. I threw myself into research about hidden cameras and tenant rights. I learned about the gaps in the law that people like Derek exploit. In many states, the laws hadn't caught up with the technology. What Derek did to us was clearly wrong, but proving it legally was more complex than it should have been. The support group for victims of voyeurism became a lifeline. Hearing other people's stories, learning how they'd rebuilt their sense of security, gave us hope. Some had been dealing with the aftermath for years. Others had successfully prosecuted their perpetrators and moved on. All of them understood the unique violation of having your most private moments stolen. Derek's lawyer tried multiple tactics to get the charges reduced. They claimed Derek had mental health issues, that he needed treatment, not punishment. They tried to paint him as a victim of circumstance who'd made poor choices, but the pattern of behavior across multiple families made it clear this was calculated criminal activity. We had to move. Even after removing all the cameras, we couldn't shake the feeling of being watched in that house. Every corner, every shadow made us paranoid. We found a rental across town and started fresh. The financial hit was significant, between the mortgage on the empty house and the new rent, but our peace of mind was worth it. The other victims and I formed an alliance of sorts. We shared evidence, coordinated with prosecutors, and supported each other through the legal process. One family had kept meticulous records that helped establish Derek's pattern. Another had caught him on their own security cameras installing his hidden devices. Together, we built an ironclad case. Derek made one final attempt to contact me directly, showing up at my workplace. Security escorted him out, but not before he screamed that I'd ruined his life. That family was supposed to protect each other. The irony of him talking about family after what he'd done to his own sister was staggering. This violation of the restraining order added another charge to his growing list. As the trial date approached, the prosecutor felt confident about conviction. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple victims, recorded admissions, physical evidence, and a clear pattern of behavior. Derek had finally targeted too many people to talk his way out of it, but I knew the trial would be just the beginning of our healing process. The experience taught me that home security means more than locks and alarms. It means being careful who you trust with access to your private space. It means listening to your instincts when something feels off. And it means understanding that family connections don't guarantee good intentions. Anna and I grew stronger through the ordeal, but it took work. We had to rebuild trust, not just in each other, but in the world around us. We became advocates for stronger privacy laws and better victim support. What Derek did to us was horrible, but we refused to let it define our future. Looking back, the red flags were there from the beginning. The way Derek referred to our house as his place, the mysterious garage project, the manipulation and gaslighting. But when someone comes to you claiming claiming to need help, especially family, it's natural to want to believe the best. Derek counted on that. He weaponized our compassion against us. I stared at my phone screen, rereading Derek's latest text message. He'd somehow gotten my new number despite all our precautions. The message contained a link to a website I didn't recognize, followed by a countdown timer showing 72 hours. My hands trembled as I clicked the link against my better judgment. The page loaded slowly, revealing thumbnails of videos with our address listed underneath. Derek had created an entire website dedicated to selling our private moments. The preview images were blurred, but I could make out enough to know they were real. A subscription model was already set up, with different tiers for access. The highest tier promised exclusive unreleased content for $200 a month. I screenshot everything before the page mysteriously went offline 5 minutes later. Derek was getting smarter, using temporary domains that disappeared before authorities could trace them. I forwarded the evidence to our lawyer, who called within minutes. She explained that Derek was exploiting international hosting services, making it nearly impossible to permanently remove the content once uploaded. Anna found me sitting on our rental's front steps, head in my hands. She'd just returned from her sister's place with our daughter, hoping we could start establishing some normalcy. Instead, I had to tell her about the website. She listened quietly, her jaw clenched tight. When I finished, she took out her own phone and started making calls. Her first call was to her cousin Xander, who worked in IT security. Xander had always been the tech genius of Anna's family, the one everyone called when their computers acted up. Within an hour, he was at our door with a laptop bag and a grim expression. He spent the next 6 hours tracking Derek's digital footprint, finding breadcrumbs across multiple platforms. What Xander discovered made our situation even worse. Derek hadn't just created one website. He'd established accounts on numerous platforms, each with different usernames, but all containing our content. Some were on mainstream sites with lax moderation. Others were on darker corners of the internet where anonymity reigned. Derek had even created fake social media profiles using our photos, advertising the videos to specific communities. The next morning brought another surprise. Our elderly neighbor knocked on our door, holding a package that had been mistakenly delivered to her address. It was addressed to Anna's maiden name, which she hadn't used in years. Inside was a burner phone with one number saved. When we turned it on, text messages started flooding in from Derek. He wanted to meet, said he had a business proposition that would benefit everyone, claimed he could make all the websites disappear if we just heard him out. The messages grew increasingly frantic as hours passed without a response. He started mentioning specific details about our daughter's daycare schedule, her favorite playground, the route Anna took to work. We immediately pulled our daughter from daycare and Anna took leave from her job. The threat was no longer just about privacy invasion. Derek was escalating to implied physical danger. Our lawyer advised us to document everything, but warned that proving intent to harm would be difficult without direct threats. That weekend, Anna's parents showed up unannounced. They'd driven 4 hours after Derek had called them crying about how we'd destroyed his life. He'd convinced them he was Sewers Lytle, that all he wanted was closure. They begged us to meet with him just once, supervised, to help him move on. The manipulation was masterful. He'd turned our refusal to engage into evidence of our cruelty. I watched Anna struggle with her parents' pleas. These were the people who'd raised her, who'd always been there for her. Now Derek was forcing her to choose between their wishes and our safety. She finally told them about the websites, showing them sanitized evidence on Xander's laptop. Her mother collapsed into tears while her father's face turned purple with rage. The family meeting that followed was chaos. Anna's siblings arrived throughout the day, each having received different versions of events from Derek. He'd tailored his lies to each person, exploiting their individual weaknesses and biases. Her older sister Sandy, who'd always resented Anna's stable marriage, seemed almost sympathetic to Derek. Her younger brother believed Derek needed mental health support, not legal consequences. By evening, the family was split into factions. Those who believed Derek was sick but not malicious. Those who thought we were overreacting to a prank gone wrong. And the few who understood the severity of what Derek had done. The arguments grew heated, old resentments surfacing. Derek had managed to detonate a bomb in Anna's family without even being present. Anna's father finally stood up and declared he was going to talk to Derek himself. No amount of pleading could stop him. He drove off into the night while the rest of us waited anxiously. 3 hours later, he returned looking shaken. Derek had met him at a public restaurant playing the perfect victim. But something in Derek's eyes when he thought no one was looking had chilled Anna's father to the bone. The conversation had revealed more disturbing details. Derek claimed to have investors interested in his content creation business. He spoke about expansion plans, finding more talent, and building an empire. When Anna's father expressed horror, Derek had smiled and said it was just the modern economy. Everyone was selling something. At least he was honest about it. Our lawyer called an emergency meeting the next day. The situation had escalated beyond simple invasion of privacy. Derek was potentially building a criminal enterprise using our stolen content as the foundation. She recommended we contact federal authorities, as this had crossed state lines with the online distribution. The FBI might take interest if there was evidence of a larger operation. The federal investigation process was slow and frustrating. We had to relive our trauma repeatedly, describing to various agents how we'd discovered the cameras, what the footage contained, how Derek had threatened us. Each retelling felt like another violation. Meanwhile, Derek continued operating freely, protected by the slow pace of justice. Anna decided to take matters into her own hands. She reached out to other victims Derek had targeted, building a network of survivors. Together, they created their own website documenting Derek's crimes, warning potential future victims. They shared their stories anonymously, creating a paper trail that couldn't be ignored. The site gained traction quickly, with more victims coming forward. One woman, Josephine, had a particularly harrowing story. Derek had lived with her family for 6 months 2 years ago. She discovered the cameras only after her teenage daughter mentioned feeling watched. The psychological damage to her child had been severe, requiring years of therapy. Josephine had evidence Derek had sold that footage too, though she'd never pursued charges out of shame. The network grew to include 12 families across 3 states. Each story followed the same pattern. Derek would infiltrate through sympathy, install cameras systematically, then monetize the footage after being expelled. He'd refined his technique over years, learning from each mistake. We weren't dealing with an impulsive criminal, but a calculated predator. Derek must have discovered the Survivor website because his tactics shifted. Instead of direct threats, he began a campaign of legal harassment. He filed defamation suits against anyone who shared their story publicly. He claimed copyright ownership of the videos, sending cease and desist letters. He even tried to trademark trademark his brand, turning our violation into intellectual property. Our legal bills skyrocketed as we fought each frivolous lawsuit. Derek was representing himself, making the process even more chaotic. He'd file motions filled with rambling manifestos about privacy rights and creative freedom. The judges grew frustrated with his antics, but the system required they address each filing. Derek had weaponized the legal system against us. The stress began affecting our marriage in ways we hadn't anticipated. Anna threw herself into the Survivor Network, spending hours counseling new victims and coordinating legal strategies. I became obsessed with security, installing increasingly elaborate systems in our rental. We were living in the same house but occupying different worlds, united only by our shared trauma. Our daughter started showing signs of anxiety. She'd wake up screaming about the bad man, even though she'd never directly interacted with Derek during his stay. Children absorb more than we realize. We increased her therapy sessions and tried to maintain normal routines. But how do you explain to a toddler why she can't go to her favorite park anymore? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Derek's former accomplices reached out through our lawyer. This person, who insisted on anonymity, had helped Derek set up the technical infrastructure for his operation. They'd thought it was a legitimate security business until discovering the truth. Now they wanted to make amends by providing evidence. The information they shared was staggering. Derek had footage from over 50 homes, most of which he'd never lived in. He'd posed as a maintenance worker, cable installer, even a real estate agent to gain access. The camera installation had become an addiction for him, a way to feel power over others. The money was secondary to the thrill of invasion. This whistleblower provided server locations, password lists, and financial records showing Derek's earnings. He'd made over $200,000 selling stolen footage. The money trail led to offshore accounts and cryptocurrency wallets. Derek had built a sophisticated operation while maintaining his image as a struggling, sympathetic figure. Armed with this evidence, federal authorities finally took decisive action. They raided Derek's current location, seizing computers, hard drives, and boxes of tiny cameras. The scope of evidence was overwhelming. Derek had kept meticulous records, apparently planning to write a book about his experiences. His narcissism had created a perfect trail of evidence. But Derek wasn't there during the raid. He'd disappeared 2 days earlier, leaving behind only empty hardware and a note saying he'd gone to expand internationally. Security footage showed him at the airport, but the trail went cold after that. He'd been planning his escape while we'd been building our case. The manhunt began immediately. Derek's photo appeared on law enforcement websites. His bank accounts were frozen, his passport flagged, but he'd had months to prepare, possibly creating false identities and establishing safe houses. The investigator warned us he might have associates we didn't know about. Anna's family was devastated by the revelation of Derek's true nature. Her parents aged years and weeks, blaming themselves for enabling him. Her siblings struggled with guilt over defending him. The family gatherings that had once been chaotic but loving became stilted affairs filled with unspoken recriminations. We hired a private investigator to supplement law enforcement efforts. She specialized in cybercrime and had connections in the darker corners of the internet where Derek might be operating. Within days, she'd found new websites popping up with similar content, suggesting Derek was still active despite being a fugitive. The psychological toll of knowing Derek was out there, free and potentially watching, was crushing. Every unknown car in our neighborhood sent our hearts racing. Every unexpected package made us panic. We lived in a constant state of hypervigilance that exhausted us physically and mentally. Our daughter picked up on our fear, becoming increasingly clingy and anxious. I started experiencing panic attacks at work. The feeling of being watched, even in secure environments, became overwhelming. My productivity plummeted. My boss was understanding at first, but patience wore thin as weeks turned to months. The career I'd worked so hard to build began crumbling under the weight of Derek's ongoing torture. Anna found solace in helping other victims navigate the legal system. She became an expert in privacy laws and victims' rights. Her work with the Survivor Network gave her purpose, but it also meant she was constantly immersed in stories of violation and betrayal. She'd come home emotionally drained, with nothing left for our own healing. The private investigator made a disturbing discovery. Derek wasn't working alone anymore. He'd connected with an international ring of similar criminals who shared techniques and content. The network operated like a twisted franchise, with Derek as one of many content providers. Our violation had become part of a global criminal enterprise. This revelation changed the investigation's scope. International law enforcement agencies became involved. The case was no longer just about one man's crimes, but about dismantling an entire network. We were asked to testify before various committees and agencies, each time reliving our nightmare for a new audience. The media finally picked up the story, though we'd tried to maintain anonymity. A tech journalist had been investigating the rise of hidden camera crimes, and our case became a centerpiece of her expose. Suddenly, our private nightmare was public consumption. Reporters called constantly, wanting interviews and exclusive details. We made the difficult decision to go public with our story. Hiding hadn't protected us, and maybe visibility would help other victims. The interview process was grueling. Sitting under studio lights, describing the most violating experience of our lives to millions of strangers, felt like another form of exposure, but it also felt like reclaiming some power. The public response was mixed. Most people expressed sympathy and outrage, but there were also those who blamed us for letting Derek into our home, who said we should have known better. The victim blaming was particularly painful coming from people who couldn't understand how masterfully Derek had manipulated everyone around him. Our story inspired legislation in several states strengthening penalties for hidden camera crimes. We testified before state legislatures, sharing our experience to help craft better protections for future victims. It was exhausting work, but it gave meaning to our suffering. If we could prevent one family from experiencing what we had, it would be worth it. Derek was finally captured 6 months after disappearing. He'd been hiding in plain sight, working at a tech repair shop under a false identity. A customer recognized him from the media coverage and called authorities. The arrest footage showed Derek smiling calmly as they led him away, as if he'd been expecting it all along. The trial preparation began immediately. Prosecutors warned us it would be a long process with Derek representing himself again. He'd turned the courtroom into his stage before, and would likely do so again. We steeled ourselves for months of legal theater while Derek played the victim to anyone who would listen. But first came the extradition hearings. As Derek had been arrested in a different state, he fought the process at every turn, filing motion after motion. Each delay meant more time in limbo for us and the other victims. The legal system that should have protected protected us seemed designed to give endless opportunities to our tormentor. During this time, we discovered Derek had been posting manifesto-style videos online from prison. He'd somehow smuggled in a phone and was building a following among certain internet communities who saw him as a free speech martyr. The videos were removed as quickly as they appeared, but the damage was done. Derek was creating a narrative where he was the hero of his own story. The trial date arrived faster than expected. Derek's extradition had been expedited after he'd attacked another inmate who'd recognized him from the news. The assault added new charges, but also meant he'd be transported sooner. We drove to the courthouse at dawn, passing through multiple security checkpoints that Derek's case had necessitated. The courtroom was packed with victims from multiple states. I recognized faces from our online support network, people who'd traveled hundreds of miles to see Derek face justice. Josephine sat in the front row, her daughter beside her. The teenager looked stronger than her mother had described, though her hands shook slightly. Derek entered wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles, but his demeanor remained eerily confident. He'd grown a beard during his time away, and his hair was longer, but those calculating eyes remained the same. He scanned the gallery slowly, making eye contact with each victim. When his gaze met mine, he smiled. The prosecutor opened with a devastating summary of Derek's crimes. She detailed the pattern of manipulation, the systematic violations, the financial exploitation. She presented evidence from 17 different homes, showing Derek's evolution from opportunistic criminal to organized predator. The jury looked increasingly disturbed as she laid out the scope of his actions. Derek, representing himself, stood for his opening statement. He spoke for 40 minutes about privacy rights, creative expression, and the misunderstanding that had led to these charges. He claimed every camera had been installed with permission, that the footage was art, that we were persecuting him for being different. His performance was polished, rehearsed. The first witness was the FBI's digital forensics expert. She walked the jury through the technical evidence, showing how Derek had hidden cameras in everyday objects. She explained the sophisticated network he'd built for distributing content, the encryption methods he'd used, the money trail leading to offshore accounts. Derek objected constantly, but the judge overruled him each time. When my turn came to testify, I focused on facts rather than emotions. I described finding the cameras, discovering the USB drive, the escalating threats. I played the recording of Derek's blackmail attempt, his voice filling the courtroom as he demanded $50,000. The jury leaned forward, absorbing every word. Derek's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned my character, my parenting, my marriage. He suggested I'd known about the cameras all along, that this was an elaborate scheme to extort money from him. He brought up my foster care background, implying I was damaged, unreliable. The prosecutor objected repeatedly, but Derek had made his insinuations. Anna testified next, her voice steady despite everything. She detailed how Derek had manipulated family dynamics, turned relatives against each other, exploited their trust. She presented emails and text messages showing his gradual escalation. When Derek tried to paint her as a vindictive sister, she simply pointed to the evidence. The facts spoke louder than his theatrics. The parade of victims continued for days. Each person shared their story, building an undeniable pattern. Derek's confidence began to crack as witness after witness described identical experiences. His objections became more frantic, his questions more aggressive. The judge warned him repeatedly about courtroom behavior. The technical evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors showed receipts for camera purchases dating back 5 years. They presented Derek's own notes, planning installations in homes he hadn't even visited yet. They played excerpts from his prison videos, where he'd essentially confessed while building his martyr narrative. His narcissism had created the perfect prosecution case. Derek's defense was a rambling mess. He called no witnesses, relying instead on his own testimony. He spent hours on the stand, weaving conspiracy theories about government surveillance, corporate espionage, and artistic persecution. He claimed we were all actors, paid to destroy him. Even his court-appointed advisory council looked embarrassed. The smoking firearm came from Derek's former accomplice, who testified via video link from a secure location. They detailed Derek's operation from the inside, explaining how he'd recruited others, taught them installation techniques, shared profits from content sales. They produced chat logs where Derek bragged about his collection, rating different homes by their potential value. During a recess, Derek's parents approached us in the hallway. They looked broken, aged beyond their years. His mother apologized through tears, saying they'd created a monster by always excusing his behavior. His father handed Anna an envelope containing a check, their life savings, to help with our legal bills. We couldn't accept it, but the gesture meant everything. The prosecution's closing argument was methodical and damning. They walked through each charge, connecting it to specific evidence. They showed the jury the pattern of escalation, from single home violations to organized criminal enterprise. They emphasized the psychological damage to victims, particularly Josephine's daughter. They asked for maximum sentences on all counts. Derek's closing was a 3-hour spectacle. He quoted philosophy, referenced obscure legal precedents, and compared himself to persecuted artists throughout history. He claimed the real crime was society's prudishness, our inability to appreciate his vision. He ended by staring directly at the victims section, saying we'd thank him someday for opening our eyes. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. As they filed back in, Derek's mask finally slipped. His hands trembled as the foreman stood, guilty on all counts. 47 charges including voyeurism, extortion, criminal harassment, interstate commerce of illegal content, and running a criminal enterprise. The maximum sentence would be 60 years. Derek screamed as they read the verdicts. He lunged toward our section before bailiffs restrained him. He shouted that we'd destroyed an artist, that history would vindicate him. As they dragged him out, he locked eyes with Anna one last time. The hatred there was pure, undiluted, but also, finally, defeat. The sentencing hearing came 6 weeks later. Victims gave impact statements, describing the ongoing trauma, the therapy bills, the destroyed sense of security. Josephine's daughter spoke about years of feeling watched, of showering in the dark, of trusting no one. Her words carried more weight than any legal argument could. The judge sentenced Derek to 45 years without parole. He called Derek a predator who'd weaponized technology and trust against innocent families. He ordered full restitution to all victims, though we knew Derek's assets would barely cover legal fees. He also issued a lifetime ban on Derek possessing any recording equipment upon eventual release. Derek filed appeals immediately, of course. He claimed ineffective counsel despite representing himself, judicial bias, prosecutorial misconduct. Every filing was denied. He started writing letters to media outlets outlets, trying to maintain his narrative of persecution. Most ignored him, though a few fringe websites picked up his story. We returned to our rental exhausted but relieved. The criminal trial was over, though civil suits would continue for years. That night, for the first time in months, we slept without checking window locks repeatedly. Our daughter crawled into bed with us around midnight, and we let her stay. The three of us needed the closeness. The next months involved practical matters. We finally sold the contaminated house at a significant loss. The new owners were fully informed of what had happened there. They were a young couple who appreciated the discount and planned to gut renovate anyway. Watching them excitedly plan their future helped exorcise some demons. Anna's family slowly healed. Her siblings who'd defended Derek struggled most with guilt. Sandy wrote a long letter apologizing for her initial skepticism. The younger brother started therapy to understand how he'd been manipulated. Family gatherings resumed, smaller and quieter than before, but genuine. Derek's empty chair was never mentioned. The Survivor Network evolved into a formal nonprofit. Anna became a board member, helping establish resources for voyeurism victims nationwide. They created educational materials, lobbied for stronger laws, and provided support groups. What started as trauma response became meaningful advocacy work. Some victims found purpose in preventing future violations. I returned to work gradually, negotiating a hybrid schedule that allowed me to ease back in. My boss had held my position despite my extended absence. Colleagues were supportive but careful, unsure what to say. I focused on routine tasks initially, rebuilding my concentration and confidence. The familiar rhythms of work provided unexpected comfort. Our daughter started at a new preschool with enhanced security measures. We'd interviewed dozens of places, looking for the right balance of safety and normalcy. She initially resisted, clinging to us at drop-off, but children are resilient. Within weeks, she was running to greet friends, her anxiety fading with each normal day. The financial recovery took longer. Between legal bills, moving costs, security systems, and therapy for all three of us, our savings were decimated. We created a strict budget, cutting everything non-essential. Anna picked up freelance work she could do from home. I took on extra projects at work. Slowly, painfully, we rebuilt. Derek continued filing lawsuits from prison, each more frivolous than the last. He sued the camera manufacturers for enabling his crimes. He sued the FBI for destroying his art. He sued us for emotional distress. Judges began dismissing his filings without hearings. His own legal harassment campaign turned him into a judicial pariah. 1 year after the trial, we received notice that Derek had been transferred to a maximum security facility after attempting to blackmail a guard. He'd somehow obtained compromising photos and tried his old tricks. The additional charges added 10 years to his sentence. Even in prison, he couldn't stop his predatory behavior. The civil settlements trickled in slowly. Derek's hidden assets were gradually discovered and liquidated. Cryptocurrency wallets were traced and seized. International accounts were frozen. The total barely covered a fraction of damages, but the symbolic victory mattered. Every dollar recovered was proof that crime hadn't paid. We moved again, this time to a house we chose carefully. It was smaller than our original home, but in a neighborhood with active community watch. We installed security systems, but resisted the urge to go overboard. We wanted our daughter to feel safe, not imprisoned. Finding that balance remained an ongoing challenge. Anna published an article about our experience in a major magazine. She wrote beautifully about violation, recovery, and the importance of believing victims. The piece went viral, generating thousands of responses from people with similar experiences. She was invited to speak at conferences, becoming an unexpected expert on privacy crimes. I started volunteering with a local organization that taught digital safety to seniors. Many were terrified of technology after hearing stories like ours. I helped them understand risks without paranoia, showing them how to protect themselves while still enjoying modern conveniences. Teaching others helped me process my own fears. The nightmares faded gradually. First Anna's, then mine. Our daughters took longest to disappear. We maintained family therapy monthly, even when things seemed better. The therapist reminded us that trauma recovery wasn't linear. Some weeks were harder than others. Anniversary dates triggered unexpected reactions. Derek's parents passed away within months of each other. The stress had broken their health. Anna attended both funerals, representing our complicated grief. Derek wasn't permitted to attend, though he petitioned the court extensively. Their estate went to charity, explicitly excluding Derek. Even in death, they tried to make amends. We learned to live with heightened awareness without letting it control us. Every rental property was thoroughly inspected. Every house guest was carefully vetted. We became those people who read privacy policies and covered laptop cameras. But we also learned to laugh again, to trust selectively, to rebuild joy. 3 years after everything began, I came home to find Anna teaching our daughter to ride a bike in our driveway. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the pavement. Our daughter wobbled, caught herself, and pedaled furiously forward while Anna jogged alongside. Their laughter echoed off neighboring houses. I stood watching them, remembering how Derek had stolen such simple moments from us. But here we were, creating new ones. Not unscarred, but unbroken. Our daughter would grow up more cautious than we'd hoped, but also surrounded by love and fierce protection. We'd found our new normal. That night, Anna and I sat on our porch after putting our daughter to bed. We didn't talk about Derek or trials or trauma. We discussed weekend plans, grocery lists, a movie we wanted to see, ordinary conversations that felt like miracles. The porch light flickered, probably needing a new bulb. Neither of us panicked. Our phones buzzed simultaneously. The Survivor Network had helped pass new legislation in another state. Stronger penalties, better victim support, clearer definitions of digital voyeurism. Anna smiled, squeezing my hand. We'd turned our worst experience into something meaningful. Derek had tried to destroy us. Instead, he'd created an army of advocates. As we headed inside, I noticed our daughter had left her art project on the kitchen table. A crayon drawing of our family. 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. She'd drawn us all the same size, equally important. At the bottom, in shaky letters, "My safe family." We hung it on the refrigerator, covering the emergency contact list we'd kept there since Derek's arrest.